So far at Square Table Gaming, we've tackled the lore of enemies that are fairly straightforward. Of course, there's been digging for motivations in history, but overall we've shied away from speculating too heavily and have relied on solid in-game descriptions to unravel their mysteries. However, not every enemy in Elden Ring offers us enough information to truly uncover their story. The Oracle Envoys fall into this category. These monstrous musicians are an enigma, but we have some theories that we'd like to share with you. There are three types of Oracle Envoys that can be found in the Lands Between: the standard version, the large Oracle Envoy, and the Oracle Envoy Giants. Each wields a horn the appropriate size for their frame and will attack by either slamming it into our Tarnished or casting bubble spells towards us. These horns are described as profoundly weighty, and they were originally instruments, but one that cannot be sounded by a mere human, or perhaps it's too early to sound the call. The larger they are, the longer their arms and necks become. They are pale of skin and have no legs, which leads us to believe they may be related to another race in the Lands Between, but we'll touch on this later. The most important thing to know about these enemies comes from the Oracle Envoy ashes, which can be found near the Haligtree town site of Grace. Spirits of a monstrous band of musicians who employ sacred arts. It is said that when Oracle Envoys appear playing their pipes, they do so to herald the arrival of a new god or age. So we know that they exist for a singular reason, to signal the coming of a new god or age, which explains why we only see them in two areas of the Lands Between, the city of Leyndell and Miquella's Haligtree. The Oracle Envoys in Leyndell can be found just after entering the city. Before you approach them, they are playing their horns out towards the Erd Tree, and do not stop until we take their attention away from their music. It is likely these enemies can be found here because Leyndell is the seat of the Erd Tree, and they are playing music to usher in a new age where soon someone else will become Elden Lord, and create a new path for the Lands Between. The fact that they attack us says to me that they don't know who will be the one to change the status quo, but they have an inherent understanding that a change is coming, and it's their job to announce it to the city. The other location we find the Oracle Envoys is Miquella's Haligtree. They sit along the branches, playing music likely to herald the arrival of a new god, Miquella. Of course, Miquella isn't literally a new god, but this would be more symbolic. The Envoys are playing to announce to the world that Miquella's revival is at hand, and perhaps too is their salvation. We mentioned earlier that we believe the bodies of the Oracle Envoys, as well as a comment from viewer Nick Perry, led us to a theory about what they actually are. In our opinion, the Oracle Envoys are another form of Albinauric. Their white flesh, lack of blood, missing legs, and their presence at the Haligtree implies to us that they may be an entirely separate generation of Albinauric, unlike the first, human-looking versions, and the second, frog-looking monsters. One of the reasons we believe this is the item description for the Envoy crown, the soft bundle worn on the head by Oracle Envoys, densely wrapped in several layers of cloth. No one knows what the cloth hides, but some claim to have heard a faint whimpering from inside. It must have been their imagination. We believe underneath of these head wraps is the large head of a second-generation Albinauric. Not much is known about the Albinauric, but we do know that the first generation were essentially man-made beings. The Albinauric blood clot calls them life forms made by human hands, thus many believe them to live impure lives untouched by the Erd Tree's grace. And the blood clot itself looks suspiciously like the silver tears we find in Nokrin. While we don't know who created the Albinaurics, we know that they are looked down on by those in the Lands Between connected to the Erd Tree. We know this due to Loretta, Knight of the Haligtree, who was seeking to find a place where Albinaurics could live in peace. She believed that the Haligtree was the only place they could find salvation. As for why Loretta wanted to lead them, the silver mirror shield gives us a clue. The shape is said to imitate that of a sacred drop of dew, which inspired the absurd rumor that Loretta herself was an Albinauric. So perhaps the rumor wasn't as absurd as one would think. It's likely Loretta was leading them because they were her people, and it looks like some Oracle Envoys were brought along for the ride. When it comes down to it, there isn't a lot of evidence to prove the Oracle Envoys are actually Albinauric. We know that these man-made humans come in a variety of shapes and sizes, are pale of skin, and their first generation were created with legs destined to shrivel and die before their bodies. So our theory hinges on the Oracle Envoys being another version of these creatures, made to serve and sing the exaltations of the Elden Lord, whoever that may be. If this is the case, it makes sense that they would follow Loretta to the Haligtree, seeking their salvation, ushering in the Age of Miquella. This particular video delved deep into theory crafting for the Oracle Envoys. It's entirely possible they are unique creatures who only exist to usher in a new age or god, but the similarities between them and the Albinaurics made their stories feel a little more connected in the bigger picture. We're sure our community has their own theories about the Oracle Envoys, and we encourage you to share them with us in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss our next topic, the Banished Knights. This particular request was so popular, we didn't include it in our latest poll. We know you want their story, and we're going to make sure you get as much information as we can dig up. Join us again next time for more Elden Lore.